All right. The year is 1993. Mrs. Doubtfire and Jurassic Park are in theaters, and Janet Jackson's That's the Way Love Goes is on the radio. Like, this is such a good fucking time. And you're just a regular, degular straight man, and you're in need of a cape for your Halloween costume. Now, since you're clearly too much of a bad bitch to go to the Party City, you find yourself standing in the middle of an iconic dead drag queen's walk in closet in Harlem. I know, follow me here. Now, little do you know that as you pick through mountains of feathers and sequins, just a few inches away lies a garment bag that will change your life and the legacy of a drag icon forever. That's right. Your basic ass is about to unearth what will go on to be one of the most notorious unsolved mysteries in pop culture history. That's right. Today we're talking about the legendary, the iconic, the incomparable Dorian Corey and the mysterious scandal that casted a shadow of conspiracy and suspicion over her legacy and left the world wondering about the dark secrets she took to the grave with her. So buckle up, guys, because honestly, bitch, I can't. All right, guys. So we're gonna jump off into today's story, but I'm gonna give a quick disclaimer. Now, due to my post 2020 fatigue and disinterest in explaining Black queer history to people who are unfamiliar with it, I'm just gonna operate under the assumption that everyone that is listening has seen the culture shifting 1990 documentary called Paris is Burning by Jenny Livingston. One of the biggest and most memorable personalities from the Paris is Burning documentary, ballroom pioneer Dorian Corey. Now, you might remember her shady and hilarious one liners that she just so like they just rolled off her tongue so effortlessly when she delivered them. You know, right as she just beat her mug in a mirror over the span of the 70-minute long documentary. She was, it was kind of a transformation watching her beat her mug and just put you on to shit and put you on to wisdom and put you on to some of her experiences and what the ballroom experience was for her and what it meant for her in her house. So, before we dive into the controversy that eventually became synonymous with the name Dorian Corey, we should first dive into who she was and what made her so epic and special. What's crazy is I was actually just watching a video of her performing at Lady Bunny's Wigstock Festival in the early 90s, and you could literally feel the confidence and the energy like through the goddamn screen. I was just living for it. So, Dorian, a bad bitch. So let's talk about a few things. First of all, Dorian Corey, another Gemini. And secondly, we actually have the same fucking birthday. That's right. On June 6th of 1937, Dorian Corey was born on a farm in Buffalo, New York. Now, sidebar. Our birthday is actually D-Day. So on Dorian's 7th birthday in 1944, Allied forces launched a combined naval, air, and land assault on Nazi occupied France that forever changed the course of World War II. That is what D Day is about. Like, imagine it. Dorian's over there, and she probably just wanted like a Space Jam cake or like, like, I don't know, some Dora the Explorer shit. And what she got was like, an extremely successful invasion. So I love that for her. I love that for us. And side note, I actually heard that the invasion was planned around Dorian's birthday. Don't quote me on that, but it's just what I heard. All right, so anyways, Dorian was assigned male at birth, but eventually came out as a trans woman. Another sidebar, I'm giving a lot of those. To any of the straight podcasters who covered the story, and if you happen to be listening, making mention of her dead name and making comments about it, I don't really think it helped to progress this storyline, and I don't think it's pertinent information or necessary to the story you were trying to tell, which is the same one I'm telling. So just food for thought. Let's not and say we did. But anyways, I digress. So Dorian began her career in fashion as a window dresser at a popular department store in Buffalo. She went on to study fashion at Parsons in New York City in the late 1950s. Now, if you know, Parsons is where Project Runway, like the good old days of Project Runway, they would go to Parsons, and that's kind of where it was based at. So she had her own clothing line, and after some time, she became a sought after costume designer and seamstress within the drag community and eventually within the ballroom scene. Now, in the 1960s, this shit is fucking iconic as fuck. Dorian toured with a traveling cabaret drag act called the Pearl Box Review and was actually their snake dancer. So, bitch, pre Britney, Dorian was dancing with a live boa constrictor around her motherfucking neck. She was also one of four performers to appear on the 1972 Pearl Box Review LP, Call Me Mister. Before I go on, how fucking iconic is that? The 1960s and 70s, like, one of the craziest times to just exist and be black, to be queer, uh, to be trans. And here you have Dorian, a traveling cabaret act in the 1960s. And just, I'm just blown away. So, as time went on, Dorian had become a force within the ballroom community, and she went on to become the founder of the legendary House of Corey, period poo, which snatched over 50 grand prizes at various balls. Her drag was impeccable. She was truly ahead of the curve, and she was not lacking in imagination or innovation at all. Just to give you an example, and this is an example that I've heard referenced quite a bit. She had a 30 by 40-foot cape that she used as a part of her outfit that covered the entire audience like a fucking tent. Talk about being fucking iconic. Also, Dorian's house children included Angie Extravaganza, who was also featured in Paris's Burning and became the mother and co founder of the iconic House of Extravaganza. Now, before we get into this case, I really want to talk about who she was as a personality. Now, everyone seemed to really love Dorian. They said she was kind, she was wise, she was motherly, she was a mentor, she was generous, she was caring, but she was not to be fucked with. Okay? And Dorian was, honestly, just a bad bitch. She lived in Harlem in the 80s and 90s, which was a time where like gay bashing, gun violence was like the motherfucking norm, and she is out there living her motherfucking life. So, on one occasion, there's a story about a friend at a bowl inquired about the weight of Dorian's purse and was like, "Bitch, this shit is so fucking heavy." And Dorian was like, "Listen, I got a 22 in there and I'm not afraid to use it." Like, I'm paraphrasing, but basically was like, pulled a Medea and was like, "There's a 22 in there." Dorian was just so cool. Cool as a cucumber, cool as the other side of the pillow. There's actually an outtake from Paris is Burning, and you can find this online. I watched it. And you see Dorian in her apartment, which is just wall to wall, glamour, clutter, shit is just everywhere. She's doing her makeup. They're recording her. And then you hear just like pop, 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 like bullets popping off. And everyone's starting to panic. And Dorian has a straight face, didn't even raise an eyebrow. And she's, without turning away from the mirror, she goes, "Just another shootout in the OK Corral." And then she smirks and is continuing to adjust her wig in the mirror. Like, she goes, "You guys got in just in time. It's a fun neighborhood." And like, if you didn't love her from watching Paris is Burning, there are outtakes and stories like that that just make you love her even more. So, and this is the fucked up part. In the wake of the success of Paris is Burning, the AIDS epidemic was literally taking the gay community by storm and just wiping so many people out. Dorian was unfortunately one of them. So on August 29th of 1993, Dorian Corey passed away at the age of 56 due to AIDS-related complications. Her cremated remains were scattered in the waters off City Island, New York. So, this leads us to the inciting event that changed the course of Dorian's fucking legacy, and it also changed what we now see as the Google results when you look up her name. Because had this not happened, the results would be completely different. So, let's dive into this shit, because this is where the plot gets thicker than Trina. All right, so it was a mid morning on October 19th, 1993, just shy of 2 months after Dorian's death. Now, Dorian had enlisted her trusted friend, caretaker, and fellow drag queen, Lois Taylor, with the task of emptying out her iconic ass closet. She instructed Lois to take the items that she wanted and to sell or give the rest away. She just didn't want to see her shit going in the fucking garbage. I mean, this is Dorian Corey pieces. Like, they're iconic. So, on that fateful, crazy ass morning of October 19th, Lois met up with two straight men who were looking to purchase capes for Halloween. She brought them to Dorian's apartment, and they all began going through the campy and fabulous sequined and feathered pieces in her closet. Well, this is when an extremely heavy, lumpy plaid garment bag in the corner of the closet caught one of the customer's eye. Now, one of their eyes, right? Eyes, eye, I don't care. Anyways, they couldn't find the fucking zipper. So assuming they were like, bitch, it's got to be something amazing. Like it's got to be a beaded costume or like cuz she was known to do crazy gag-worthy shit. So Lois found a pair of scissors and gave it to one of the men and was like, "Cut that shit open," you know? As soon as they cut through the first layer of the bag, a strong and distinct odor filled the room and just jumped all up in their nostrils, knocked like, bitch, oh my God. So without investigating any further, Lois immediately called the police. Now, naturally, the cops, they told Lois, like, bitch, if we find any of your fingerprints in the body, like, you're going straight to jail. Like, do not pass go, you're going to jail. And they considered her to be a suspect initially. And I guess she, just being the badass that Lois was, she cursed them out and said, like, bitch, I'm only 135 pounds. I could never lift that thing. And if you find any fingerprints, they're going to be on the outside because I found the fucking garment bag. So to give you guys more detail, I'm going to refer to an article that was written by Julianne Tiverton for Atlas Obscura, which is a blog. Let's dive into this description. So, peeling through multiple layers. First, the bag's fabric, then taped wrappings of what was likely naugahyde, a type of faux leather, and plastic. Detectives revealed a grisly sight: a partially mummified body in the fetal position, its formerly brown complexion now purple and yellow, its ears mere cartilaginous vestiges. I fucked that word up, but don't judge me. Its blue and white boxer shorts tattered, with a bullet hole in its head. Encased within the layers of the bag, Detective Raul Figueroa observed detachable pull tabs from flip top beer cans, whose prime in the United States ranged from the 1960s to the 1970s. Sidebar: they stopped using these because around 1975 because people kept swallowing them. I can't with Americans. We've always been dumb. Back to the article. Despite the technical hurdles posed by the decay, Figueroa managed to extract fingerprints from the corpse. Now, I heard, sidebar again, the body was basically sitting in its own soup because I guess like there are like juices and shit that come out of dead bodies, but it had nowhere to go because it was like wrapped like a fucking mummy and in a fucking garment bag. So it was like all up in the soup. Okay. And this made it nearly impossible to base an accurate timeline around when the body started decaying. So the medical examiner, homeboy had his own secret for how he extracted the fingerprints. Why do I keep saying fingertips? Fingerprints, which he gate kept. Like he literally, to this day, he still has not revealed um, how he was able to extract those fingerprints. But what I heard through the motherfucking grapevine is that basically it involved cutting the fingerprints off of the hand, like the fingertips, dehydrating, rehydrating, dehydrating, rehydrating. And then he put gloves on and then put the fingertips on top of his fingers so he could like roll them to make the prints. Wild. So when someone asked him, they were like, yo, do you think that Dorian intentionally mummified this body if she was the one who did it? He answered, I don't think so. People just wrap a body in whatever's available. It's just spontaneous. You wrap it up, then you put it in a suitcase, then you put it in a closet. You look at it periodically, and you wish it would just go away. Now, I heard that and was like, what do you mean, people? What do you mean, people? And then I was listening to some shows, some podcasts, and they were commenting like, if you have a dead body in an apartment in New York City, it's going to be hard to remove it. Number one, you're high up, so it's a lot. The elevator, the stairs, it's a lot. Bodies weigh a lot. Number two, you're in a city where people are always out. They don't say that city doesn't sleep for no reason. Number three, it's probably just easier to just throw it in the closet and wait till you forget about it. I don't, first of all, I'm not here killing people, but if I was, Lord Jesus. Back to the story. Thanks to Figueroa The body was identified as Robert Bobby Worley, born December 18th, 1938. Now, let's just take a motherfucking minute, one moment, and talk about Bobby. The only records of his life to be found were of his criminal past. Now, he'd been arrested for raping and assaulting a woman in 1963 and served a whopping 3 years in prison. Now, upon his release from prison, he moved in with his brother and his brother's family. Now, allegedly, Bobby was a raging fucking alcoholic with a short temper. So, of course, he goes to their house. Of course, shit's gonna pop off. He quickly became obsessed with a woman who lived nearby, his brother, where he was living. And when she rejected his advances, he decided to rough up her 7-year-old son. Yeah, he beat up a 7-year-old because the mom didn't want to fuck on him, which is insane. So the woman obviously called the police, and that's when Bobby ran away again. So he fled again, and his family would later tell the police, after they discovered his body, that they had never saw him. They never saw him again after 1968. Now, police said that the body they found in Dorian's apartment um, could have been there anywhere from 1 to 25 years. However, between knowing that Bobby hadn't been seen since 1968 and finding those pull tabs from the 60s or 70s, police came to the conclusion that the shooting probably happened 20 years before the body was found, which is fucking wild. It's also important to note that the body had a 22 caliber bullet in its head, and Dorian owned a 22 caliber gun. Now, we'll get back to that. Well, this is where the plot just gets thicker than a snicker, y'all. According to the New York Magazine story, Fred Worley, who's Bobby's brother, told them how Bobby drunk dialed him one night around 1968 and was talking a bunch of drunken nonsense and made mention of a trans woman. I'm sure he used a slur, is what I've noted. He was seeing who was named Dorian. Yeah, the brother distinctly remembers the name Dorian being mentioned in this drunken conversation with Bobby around 1968 when he went missing / disappeared. Now, this leads us to the weeds, y'all, all up in the motherfucking weeds. And this is where I'm going to share a few of many conspiracy theories that surround this case. Now, the first theory is the most obvious, and that is the one stating that Dorian and Bobby were in an abusive relationship and she killed him out of self-defense. Now, this would corroborate, Bobby's brother's story of hearing them mention someone named Dorian in 1968. It would also back up an alleged claim by Dorian's doorman, who said he saw Bobby come see her regularly and that he heard them fighting often. Now, I don't know how true that shit is, and I cannot cite it because, bitch, I'm hearing things from all over, but it is one story I've heard with my own ears, listening to podcasts and shit. Now, there is another layer to this. It's like Trident, bitch. Ogres have Trident has layers, and so does Dorian and the story, apparently. Allegedly, Lois, we remember her, homegirl who found the body, she found a short story or screenplay that seemed to be autobiographical about a transgender woman who was a drag queen, who was a part of a cabaret, who was dating a man that she killed after he tried to force her to get gender reassignment surgery. Now, keep in mind, this was a surgery that Dorian had chosen not to undergo. So a lot of people think that the story was written as a retelling of her life. There's also a story that on her deathbed, Dorian allegedly told a friend that she had killed a man. Not a lot of details to follow, but just that she had actually murked somebody. And she said this on her deathbed in the hospital before she passed on. So all of that kind of checks out if you put together the stories that we got, but there are more theories. There's also a theory that Bobby was a burglar who she had to shoot because he broke into her apartment. Now, this theory is allegedly backed up by a claim made by Lois and the men who found the body that when they cut open the bag, there was a note that was a handwritten note that said, "This poor man broke into my home and was trying to rob me." Now, the police claim that there was no note. So either it's a case of someone wanting to insert themselves into this narrative, right? And they're making something up, or it's the cops lying. Because let's be real and pretend like cops have never lied or lost evidence before. Just saying, it's happened. However, I feel like if it was a burglar, why would the bullet wound be at the back of the head? Like, that's execution style. So to me, this theory doesn't stick. I don't know about y'all. Now, there's another story that Dorian was hiding the body to protect someone in her house, the house of Corey, and or she killed this person to protect someone in her house. There are no testimonies to back this up, but it is another theory. Sidebar. I mean, I think it really makes sense if you're going to keep a body in your apartment rather than risk taking it out in New York City and throwing it into like the river or the lake or whatever they have there. Um, Also, even if the body was that of an attacker, it's 1990s, the 1990s, 80s, 70s, whenever this happened, in the hood. Do you think the cops are really going to sympathize and believe a black trans woman who reports it? No, 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 no. She's going directly to jail. So I think if either of these are true, either of these conspiracies, either way, there's no way that I believe Dorian could have safely confessed this or reported it. So bizarre. Now, there's another theory that someone, potentially Lois, put the body in Dorian's closet after she died. So after Dorian died, there's a theory that someone was like, "Let's move the body there." Which my thing is, how the fuck do you casually move a goddamn body without being noticed? This man weighed 140 pounds. Like, how do you casually move a 140-pound dead carcass without being noticed in New York City? I mean, that was the first thing I said. But then I thought, what if the body was made to look like another one of Dorian's big drag props, right? Also, some believe that Lois set up this scene with the two buyers so that she could have witnesses that would find the body so she wouldn't be considered as a suspect. Like maybe she suspected something crazy was in that bag because she was, her caretaker who, was in that closet. And she had those men like, all right, I found buyers. Come with me. Oh, maybe we should cut into this. So she wasn't alone when it happened because they suspected her. They obviously like, they didn't pursue that. But she was the first person they suspected when they cut the bag open because she was black, she's trans, and she's there. Now, there's another theory. I'm going to mention this one, and this is the one I can actually kind of get behind, and this is the one about how the body was in the closet already when Dorian moved into the apartment. Now, you might be like, bitch, there's no way you rent an apartment and you don't know if there's not a dead body in there or you don't report it, whatever. But there are reasons why this makes sense to me. Dorian moved into that apartment in 1988 and the body was discovered in 1993. So unless she was toting around this dead body of a 140-pound man for like 30 years from apartment to apartment, which, I mean, maybe she was bringing it in under the guise of her big drag props. But unless that's the case, if the body is as old as the police think it is, it does not make sense for her to carry it around with her. Now, granted, like I said, she could have snuck it in, but it does not make sense to tote this huge body around. Also, let's talk about the possibility of the body having already been in the unit when she moved in, because I truly believe this. I want to get back to this. It's on brand for the neighborhood at the time, right? And also, like we talked about, black trans women not calling the police. And in 1988, like, come on, that's when she moved in. So, like, I, for me, this is the theory that makes the most sense. And the one that I think I can get behind is that the body was already there. Now, for the sake of drama, I want to say that she killed him. And I know that she's capable of it because she was the baddest bitch. But I don't know. The jury is out. Also, we have the brother's testimony saying that he specifically heard the name Dorian on the phone, which maybe he just made that up to insert himself into a really cool narrative of this, huge story in the 90s. But it doesn't really add up because there was nothing for him to gain. So I don't know. I'm on the fence. I feel like the body was already there, but I believe Bobby's brother. I don't know what the fuck I think. So honestly, at this point, I'm truly clean out of potential theories and what really went down. But at the end of the day, the only people who truly know what happened are Dorian and Bobby Worley, the piece of shit that he was. So either way, Dorian Corey is a fucking icon, and this story has been referenced on the show Pose, which centers around 80s ballroom scene. And there's been also a play created about the life of Dorian Corey, and of course, it revolves around the inciting event of the mummy in the closet. Now, I want to point out that the abuses and murder of trans women, especially black trans women, was all too common during Dorian's time of being alive. And unfortunately, it still is too prevalent today. Now, I'm not sure if you know this, but 2021 was a record breaking year for the number of trans people who were murdered, and 2022 has cases on the rise as well. This is not counting the murders of trans people that go unreported. Now, this isn't talking about murders, but we're not even mentioning the surge in anti trans legislation that has been presented this year, 23 of which target children in schools and school sports, and is a part of more than 175 anti LGBTQ bills in 32 states this year. So, yeah, the more you know. I feel like bills like this also promote violence against trans people. So, yeah, I just think we all need to be aware and really support each other in this and just be hyper vigilant because the stories like this are all too common. On a lighter note, I do want to leave you with a quote by Dorian from Paris is Burning that always just warms my cold little heart. And I think these words are words that we can all really live by. So Dorian said in the documentary, she said this. She goes, I always had hopes of being a big star. But but as you get older, you aim a little lower. Everybody wants to make an impression, some mark upon the world. Then you think you've made a mark on the world if you just get through it. And a few people remember your name. Then you've left a mark. You don't have to bend the world. I think it's better to just enjoy it. Pay your dues and just enjoy it. If you shoot an arrow and it goes real high, hooray, good for you. And I just love that quote so much. I'm going to end on that note. I will also say, because this just happened the day that we recorded it, rest in peace to the queer icon, the comedian, the actor, Leslie Jordan, a favorite of mine, someone that I really got into later, much later into their career. Obviously, I knew him from his performances on Will and Grace, but it was during the pandemic that he was just such a ray of light and of joy and of laughter and just letting us, queer people know that are younger, youngish, that you can still have joy and you can still have a long life. Not to get too sappy, but I mean, I feel like just like Dorian Corey, there were so many gay icons that we lost due to the AIDS epidemic, so we don't have as large of a spectrum of older queer people who are, out and who are, famous even, for example. I mean, I feel like RuPaul is one of the oldest that we have now, and it's just very telling. And just want to shout out Leslie Jordan and just say rest in peace, and thank you for all the laughter, especially during the pandemic. And watch me twirl, Daddy, watch me twirl, and whale shit. I will always take that, carry that with us. So, on the end of this episode, thank you guys for listening. I love you all. If, like I said on the last episode, if there are stories you come across that you think would be great featured on the show, reach out to me. It's true crime. It's just ratchet, wild shit, mysteries and scandal. So we love all of that. Feel free to reach out to a bitch, and maybe we'll feature it on the show. So thank you all for listening to Bitch I Can't, because literally I can't. Have a good one, guys.